In today's video, I'm going to talk about how many sets I did in a week for me to progress from FFMI 25 to FFMI 26. I'm going to break down my weekly volume per each body part, explain the reason why I distribute my weekly training volume this way, and share my 2 cents on the maximum weekly training volume. So if you're already an advanced lifter but still want to advance further, I'm sure the tips from this video will be helpful to you. The mainstream recommended volume for each body part for muscle growth is between 10 to 20 sets per week. While it is a solid starting point for beginners and intermediates, is it still solid advice for advanced or not? If you have watched my previous videos, you would know that I do not have high faith in mainstream, and as you will see in this video, my weekly training volume is substantially different from the mainstream recommendations. But before I talk about my training volume, let's first dispense with my equipment choices. Nowadays, most of my training is based on machines and cables. Only a small portion is based on free weights. But when I first started my training as a beginner, all of my exercises were free weight compound exercises. And I have specifically addressed this polar opposite situation in my very first series, free weights versus cables versus machines. You can click on this link if you want to know the reason why I shifted away from free weights as an advanced. But if you're a beginner or an early intermediate, a fair warning here. Don't copy what I do. Stick to the basic, boring free weight compound exercises. Build a real solid foundation for yourself first before you want to try the cables and fancy machines. Alright, now we are done with equipment selections. Without further ado, let me reveal my weekly training volume per each body part. And as I train 3 times full body each week, and there's no substantial difference between my training sessions, you can pretty much divide the weekly volume by 3 and calculate my session volume. And I will kickstart my body part from the lower body, as it contains almost 70% of your total muscle mass. Hamstrings and glutes, between 18 sets to 21 sets, or to be more specifically, 18 sets to 21 sets for my hamstrings. This is definitely at the upper end of the recommended weekly volume. But as I mentioned in the Unsung Hero series, you can never have too big hamstrings in terms of functionality or physique development. That's why I will always start my weight training session with 3 sets of machine hamstring curls, and later on do 3 to 4 sets of glute ham raise. Ever since I became an advanced, the training volume for hamstrings has always remained very high, and the result is well paid off. My hamstrings are some of my best body parts. They definitely make my legs look much thicker from the side and much more complete than normal gym bros legs. So yes, if you're an advanced, I definitely recommend that you crank up your hamstring training volume to above 15 sets per week. Quadriceps, between 9 to 12 sets. This is the lower end of the recommended weekly training volume and only half of my hamstring volume. But if you have watched my previous video, Volume Modifiers, you will know that I distribute my quad training volume based on the 2:1 hamstring to quadriceps ratio to address the congenital imbalance between these 2 muscle groups. And that's part of the reason why I rarely suffer from the common knee pains like most other gym bros. Normally, I will do 3 sets of machine squats in one session. It could be a belt squat, a pendulum squat, or hack squat. Although on some occasion, I would want to take the easy route and replace machine squat with leg extensions. Quad training is a tricky business when you are advanced. Yes, it is the biggest muscle and gives you the biggest growth potential, but also it is the muscle that demands the highest recovery reserve and the longest recovery period, and brings about the most common knee pain problem in my experience. Therefore, it is better to curb your enthusiasm when it comes to quad training. And on a side note, I actually accumulate a lot of quad training volume by doing at least 3 hours of fasted cardio weekly on the elliptical. So increasing your weekly cardio volume may be another more intelligent way to bump up your quad training volume than adding more sets when you are advanced. And one more time, if I may, not doing cardio is really killing your gains, even your quad gains. Back between 18 to 27 sets, or to be more specifically, at least 18 sets of rows or even more, and the rest sets will be vertical pulls. Again, if you have watched my previous video volume modifiers, you would know that I do this to comply with the 3:1 pull-to-push ratio proposed by the injury prevention specialist John Rosson. And for most of the time, I'm also complying with this 2:1 row to vertical pull ratio as well. As I said in my previous 10 Fitness Commandments series, once you have the ability to do more than 10 bodyweight pull-ups, your back training focus should gradually shift from pull-ups to rows. And as you progress further, pull-ups will defer more and more to rows. In fact, there were days that I would only do rowing movements for my back. Cable rows will always be the staple in my back training, and I will do 3 to 6 sets in every single training session. Other rowing movements could be machine Dorian Yates row, the machine circular row, the single hand T-bar row, and recently I've become a fan of inverted rows. Rows are definitely the king of upper body exercises when you're advanced, and that's why my rowing volume is at the upper end of recommended weekly training volume. But vertical pulls also have their place in training as well, although nowadays I would only do machine-assisted pull-ups as a warm-up for my back before I do the heavy rowing movements. But on another note, I've always been a sucker for machine pull-over, and I would generally finish my training session with 3 sets of machine pull-over. This exercise is Dorian Yates' favorite for a reason. There is no other exercise that can target your lats more precisely than this one. Back training has always remained my training priority since the very beginning, and the result speaks for itself. Look at this photo back in May 2020 before I started my training. My kyphotic posture was horrendous. Now with a wide and thick back, my entire appearance has transformed. Just like you can never have too big hamstrings, you can never have too big of a back. Develop your posterior chain, and it will significantly enhance your front appearance. Chest and shoulders, 9 sets for each of them. On the flip side of my enthusiasm for posterior chain muscles, I have never been a big fan of anterior muscles, so much so that I made a video called Training Like Arnold Will Kill Your Gains, and called out focusing on training your chest and biceps is a big mistake for most people out there, whether it is in terms of improving your physiques or maintaining your daily functions. And to this day, my chest and shoulder training is still a minimalist approach. 3 sets of machine incline press, 3 sets of machine side lateral raise, and that's it. No bench press, no overhead press, and no flies. My chest may be lagging behind my other body parts, but I'm fine with this small compromise. My shoulders, despite I have not done any direct overhead press for a very long time, are actually quite well developed, particularly in rear delt and side delt. In the grand scheme of developing your whole body, trust me, unless all your other body parts are all well developed, chest and shoulders really should not be the top of your training priority. Triceps, 18 to 27 sets. This will really depend on whether you will count machine pull-over as tricep training or not. In reality, it is a very good tricep long head exercise, and that's part of the reason why I'm a sucker for machine pull-over, because it kills 2 birds, your lats and your triceps, with 1 stone. Contrary to the general belief that chest and shoulders should be the primary mover in pressing movements, the triceps should be the primary mover in all pressing movements, and that's why my tricep training volume is very high. But instead of using compound movements to engage my chest and shoulders, I train my triceps in isolations most of the time. The cable push down is the bread and butter for me, and I will do at least 5 sets in each session. The V handle, the dual rope, the overhead. You can never have too big a pair of triceps. Biceps, brachialis and brachioradialis. 21 sets to over 30 sets. This is where I want to share my 2 cents on the maximum weekly training volume. If you refer back to my back training volume, there are about 20 sets of rowing. And if you take 1 set of rowing as half a set for bicep training, then my bicep training volume is going to be over 30 sets. But in my personal case, I can confidently say that because I have very good mind-muscle connection to my back muscles, I'm not actively engaging my biceps in all my back exercises, and therefore, my back training volume has very little effect on my bicep training. And as a matter of fact, my biceps are now perhaps the most glaring weakness out of all my body parts because they rarely receive any direct training stimulus. But on another note, all the rows and vertical pulls definitely train my brachialis and brachioradialis. That's why despite my weak biceps, I always have well or even overdeveloped brachialis and brachioradialis. And I've been including 7 sets of hammer curls in every training session for a while now, which again heavily target brachialis and brachioradialis. When you add these 2 volumes together, the weekly training volume for my brachialis and the brachioradialis is well over 30 sets, and the recovery for these 2 muscles are still on point. So I do think that when it comes to calculating your maximum weekly training volume, there are a few factors for you to consider. Number 1, how much is the target muscle engaged in compound movements? For example, if you're bicep dominant, then you can count all your rows and pull-ups for your bicep training and don't throw in any isolation exercises. But for me, all the rows and pull-ups have very little influence in my bicep training volume. And if I want to grow my biceps, I have to include isolation bicep curls to meet the recommended weekly training volume. Depending on your own biomechanics, this factor can significantly vary your maximum weekly training volume. Number 2, maximum weekly training volume is muscle group dependent. Some muscle groups are just much more resilient to high volume training, whereas some muscle groups are not. For example, my brachialis and brachioradialis can survive more than 30 sets in a week. But I'm damn sure if I do barbell curls instead of hammer curls for 30 sets, my biceps would be inflamed. Another example would be my tricep training compared to my chest training. My triceps can stand the abuse of more than 6 sets in every training session, but if I do 6 sets of chest press, my pecs will be sore for quite a few days. There is definitely a recovery discrepancy between different muscle groups, and you have to be in tune with it to push your training volume intelligently. Number 3, you can build up training volume tolerance with certain muscle groups. This point is tied to the second point, and I have practiced this myself on different muscle groups. I have not done any hammer curls for a very long time. They're only included in my training just a few months ago, and when I first started including them, there was a degree of soreness brought out by the suddenly increased training volume. But in the next few months, the soreness has receded, and now I'm totally fine with super high volume for brachialis and the brachioradialis training. The same thing happened with my hamstrings as well. I was not always smashing my hamstring with high volume, but I gradually built up the volume tolerance by adding a few sets of hamstring curls in every session. One thing to be mindful is that it's better to use isolation movements to increase the training volume tolerance instead of using compound movements. And this could be another reason why isolation exercises matter a lot to advanced hypertrophy trainees. Number 4, maximum weekly training volume is joint dependent. The best example for this is hip joint versus knee joint. If I train my legs by doing belt squat with a wide stance and sit back, as the load is shifted to my hip joint and my glutes, my knees have much less load to bear. I can do 5 sets of belt squat and my knees would not hurt. But if I train my legs by doing hack squats, as I cannot sit back on my hip joint, now my knees have a lot more weight to bear. And if I still do 5 sets, my knees would hurt and render me unable to train for days. Same thing for elbow joint versus shoulder joint. I do high volume of tricep cable pushdowns but low volume of chest presses. Some joints are just much more heavy duty than other joints. This point is probably the most important point to take home when it comes to maximum weekly training volume, because ultimately the Achilles heel in your weight training is going to be your connective tissues, joints, tendons, ligaments, not your muscles. If your exercises spare the more vulnerable joints, then you can increase the weekly training volume significantly. But if your exercises include the more vulnerable joints, then you need to curb the weekly training volume accordingly. Let's say, guys, the exact sets I did in a week for each body part to progress from FFMI 25 to FFMI 26. Please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to know other things I have learned from FFMI 25 to FFMI 26, you can click on this link to find out the other 10 lessons I want to share with you. Thank you for your support, and I will see you all next time.